My name is Malusi. We say Parapodcast from Africa to the world, and that is what we do. We try to ensure that the paramedicine story of Africa is told and people understand what's happening there. I'm from South Africa, Tulani is from South Africa, and then Elias is from Namibia. If you look at it, it looks at the southern parts of Africa, so you'll see a lot of dense content that comes out of that part of Africa. We tell our story. We want to ensure that the research that happens in Africa, in South Africa, is out there. People know about it. We're part of the international community. A lot of collaborations happen, a lot of studies are done globally, but most of the time we don't see Africa being involved. So we thought, why don't we just talk about it, get it out there, and not only in the global space, but also in the national space of our countries where we're from. People don't talk about ambulance service, so we wanted to talk about it. That is what we do.
Right.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bedsides and Boardroom podcast. We have a very different episode. If you followed our channel for a while, you will normally see that there's one guest, and now we have three. So we have the team from the Parapodcast here, and we're going to be speaking about their podcast, what motivated them, and we're going to be speaking about some issues in the EMS. So welcome, guys. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
There's three of you, so I'm going to ask Malusi just to introduce the podcast, Parapodcast, and just tell us a little bit about each one of you.
All right, so we are from the Parapodcast, as we've said. My name is Malusi Mtetwa. We say Parapodcast from Africa to the world, and that is what we do. We try to ensure that the paramedicine story of Africa is told and people understand what's happening there. I'm from South Africa, Tulani is from South Africa, and then Elias is from Namibia. If you look at it, it looks at the southern parts of Africa, so you'll see a lot of dense content that comes out of that part of Africa. We tell our story. We want to ensure that the research that happens in Africa, in South Africa, is out there. People know about it. We're part of the international community. A lot of collaborations happen, a lot of studies are done globally, but most of the time we don't see Africa being involved. So we thought, why don't we just talk about it, get it out there, and not only in the global space, but also in the national space of our countries where we're from. People don't talk about ambulance service, so we wanted to talk about it. That is what we do. To introduce us individually, I am Malusi Mtetwa, as I've said, and I think I've been in the industry for 20 years now. Currently, I am in Australia. I'm working as a paramedic. I am also involved with the universities here in Charles Sturt University and also Flinders University. I mainly assist with research, maybe marking or mentoring students in their research components. But I also I'm doing a PhD with the University of Western Sydney. This is my second year, still early days. Enjoying it so far, a lot of work. And I'll also move on from me now and talk about my brother there, Tulani Sibanda. Tulani has been in the industry for a long time. He worked in South Africa in the private sector. He also worked at university as a lecturer. And then now he is in Qatar. He's also a critical care paramedic over there. He works very hard looking after critically ill patient. He also is doing his PhD. He is in his final stages of his PhD. Looking forward to calling you Dr. Sibanda. Dr. Sibanda.
I receive.
Yeah. He's in his final stages of his research. And then we have Elias. Elias is sort of the heart of the podcast. He does all the editing. He keeps it going. Everything that you see out there, every improvement that is out there is because he has done it. He also advises us on a lot of tech stuff and things like that. He studied in Namibia and he worked over there for a period of time. And he also worked in London for a period of time. He also worked in New Zealand for some time. Currently, he is in the UAE in the academic space. He's pushing 2 qualifications at the moment. I've never done that. I don't know how he gets the time to do that. He's doing a diploma and a master's degree at the same time. So this guy works hard. You can see he's got big brains over that head. Yes. So basically, this is the Parapodcast.
No, thank you, guys, and I think you guys have done a really great job for 2 reasons. Because the first is I think that you guys give voice to those people that are from the EMS, that we have this almost like this an industry that is not front and center when it comes to medicine, and a lot of people like to watch shows that are about doctors and Grey's Anatomy and doing these funny surgeries, but our part of medicine, EMS or pre-hospital medicine, doesn't get a lot of these types of shows. So I think you've given voice to those people, and then also to people from the region where we're all from, Southern Africa. So thank you very much for doing what you do, and keep it going. Just to get into the motivation for your podcast and why you started it, if you can just tell us about that. How did it start out?
So, Nate, first of all, thanks for having us on your podcast. About a year ago, we had you on our podcast and we recorded episode 5, if I still remember correctly. And we had a fantastic conversation about critical care, paramedicine, education, as well as entrepreneurship. And when we looked at that episode, it's one of the episodes that is doing well on our channel. And the tables have turned. Here we are. You've invited us on your podcast, and we're looking forward to having great conversations. Now, to answer your question, is that the Parapodcast came up as an idea, but before that is that I met Elias 2022 in the back of an ambulance. I just entered an ambulance. We were driving P1 to hospital. Now that I speak about it, it was weird that, hi, my name is Tulani, and he said Elias. Little did I know that we would start a podcast one day all together with Malusi. What happened was, I think 2024, towards the end of the year, October, somewhere there, I'll have to look at my conversations, is that I had different communication with Malusi and Elias, and to say, let's start something like a podcast. That was the idea, but how it was going to look like, at that moment during the WhatsApp conversations, we didn't know how it was going to look like. And then we had a meeting subsequent to that, I think in October as well, where we had our first board meeting. Sounds serious, but then we discussed a lot of things on, I think the part of the stuff that we discussed, it was more of questions of what we want, and which from those questions came what the podcast was going to about. We wanted to, the questions that we had, what would be the aim of the podcast? Will it be educational, interview-based, or mix of both? What niche did we want to occupy? Is it the broader healthcare or podcast space? And one of the other things that we actually had a vote on WhatsApp was the name of the podcast. That and also we had the slogan, which is Paramedicine from Africa to the world. And with what I said is that these questions tend to be what the podcast is. It is educational, it is interview-based, and research-based, and it does not only involve paramedics, it also involves a broader healthcare. And with that said, even it's more of, it aims for interprofessional collaboration to teach a wider audience, not just paramedicine, but also to document our stories that we have. Because a lot of the people that we've had on the podcast, we realize that there's a rich history that they present. A lot of the guests that we've had, especially within the South African space, about the history of emergency medical services. But that's broader how the Parapodcast came about and how everything unfolded. I don't know if Malusi and Elias want to add from that.
Nah, you've said everything.
I think you have covered most of it. I think obviously at the beginning we just wanted to have a conversation, and then you meet one person and the next person gives you an idea about what you could possibly chat about, and then you start having conversations about, what would you like to know about EMS in Africa, and they will give you a country. I don't know what's happening in Kenya. All right, let's find someone from Kenya. What's happening there? What's happening in Nigeria? Is there a training college? What's happening? So that's the idea, really, just to highlight it. Because there are going to be a lot of moments where, let's say, for instance, you want to go see the Great Migration in Kenya or wherever. I think it's Kenya and Uganda. And you want to know, what is the EMS there like? So you can come watch the episode here, because we had Dr. What's his name, Malusi? He's not gonna forgive me. Ben Wachira. Ben Wachira, exactly. That broke down what the EMS is like, not just from an ambulance perspective, but also from emergency medicine response aspect of it. And then you also get to hear of people doing amazing things like Ukolele in Namibia. Dr. Wachira, there's a foundation to try and improve at least an ambulance per district. I would like to think, just the basics. And then you get to hear what's happening in Nigeria, a country with such a large population. What's the training like? And then you get to hear what's happening in Zimbabwe, where they move from like 98 ambulances to about 6 ambulances in a city. And you really get to understand what EMS is like. And then you get to understand research, like, there is people that are doing sort of like, what's the I've just lost my words now, but like the stuff that are being done in South Africa, people have an idea of what's happening, but they don't really get to have a first-hand experience of, what are the studies going on, what are the training colleges like. So we really got to touch base with a lot of those, and I highlighted it. And if you go onto the episode, you'll really, really learn a lot as to what's happening in the South and just Africa in general.
I think I went through a similar process to start this podcast, and I didn't meet with other people. I mean, we just decided by ourselves, just out of interest. How many names?
You and your personalities.
Yeah, I just sat down with myself and spoke to myself. Yeah, Look how it turned out.
Great, good ideas.
How many names did you have? Because we really struggled. I mean, I've got. You guys didn't meet the editor, but we've got a producer and editor on the show. How many names did you guys go through before you settled on Parapodcast?
From the word go, it has always been the three of us. We had that idea. We spoke about on WhatsApp, started on WhatsApp, went to meetings, and then went to recording. But from the word go, it has always been the three of us, no other people. We were thinking of adding other people, but mostly we were growing, about admin stuff. But nonetheless, we didn't think of adding anyone else. It has always been the three of us.
And the name, how many names did you go through? Because finding a name for a podcast is difficult.
You mean as in the guests or just other people?
No, the name of the podcast.
Or the podcast.
Oh,
yeah, podcast.
I think
name.
each one had their own name. My one didn't win, and they voted against me. I don't remember what was it. But
we took your slogan though.
Oh yes, the slogan worked. It wasn't a lot. I think it was three names for each of us.
I think also because it's the three of us, it's if two of them vote on one, then that's kind of like a bit of a win. So it's democratic.
That's it.
Yeah.
You never have a tie vote. You never have a tie vote.
Yeah.
So we had about, I think, 20 names that we went through, and then we just, you try and find a podcast name, and then you got to try and look at other podcasts and other names that that are not the same. So I think we really struggled with that. There's a lot of podcasts out there. But yeah, I think you guys have done a fantastic job. And I just wanted to see what you guys obviously started out with something. Has it turned out how you wanted it in the beginning, or is it an evolving project? How has it developed over time?
I think for me personally, because there's a lot of levels to it. Personally, I did not expect that it was gonna have such an impact in me as a person. Can be talking to a person in Japan who's a guru in TXA, and could be talking to a person who is in London who is a guru in economics, So you just move around and you can talk to a person who's in America anytime. And before you talk to that person, you need to read about what they do, understand what they do, so that you can talk in the similar level that is not embarrassing to you, that doesn't embarrass your country and what you're trying to represent your industry to. So it has pushed me to become a person that is that works hard in preparation for the podcast. And that has made me to be a person that can talk to anyone. I'm confident about what I do and I'm comfortable to talk to anyone about it. So there's some self-enrichment that has happened. It's like how I picture it. It's like me taking myself to uni, attending these different courses. And at the end of the day, I become confident in whatever that I'm learning, and I'm moving. And the fact that these themes have to do with my industry makes me feel confident about being in the industry. Basically, that's and on the personal level, that's what has changed for me.
Yeah, I think from my end, I thought we were just gonna have conversations, but it didn't just turn out to be conversations. It turned out to be influential. Like, for instance, when I came to the UAE, I didn't know anyone would be watching our podcast. And then you walk into like a barber shop and someone will be like, "Oh, that's the guy from the podcast." I was like, "Who are you?" Right? And people will start telling you about they actually learn this from the podcast. And look, we don't have the huge following, but it's a very niche specific podcast. So I think that also sort of like selects a specific set of people that will watch the podcast. And then we eventually, or I'm not sure if you already announced this, but we started doing CPD points as well, collaborating with different universities. So which is not something that we thought of doing in the beginning. And we also have moments where people will come for research advice. Like, for instance, when we had Alan Beck, we got to attract people that are in the same field of study and wanted to learn more about it. And I think us having that podcast sort of like guided them to either a resource or like in a direction that they could study, right? Or at least, just assisted them in one way or another. And also the other thing is also people that are looking to advance their careers in different pathways, because we have leaders here, we have people that are coming from different backgrounds, like either, training or whatsoever. So they learn a thing or two, and also just networking really. So I didn't see it going in that direction. I thought we were just going to have conversations, but now it's becoming a platform that's informing people, that are really establishing like a baseline for EMS in Southern Africa, and trying to reach the global sort of like standard as well, which is really great. I think that's sort of like my take from how we have evolved over time.
And it kind of starts small. Yeah, sorry, Tulani.
Yeah, sorry. Just to go back a little bit, the names that we had, each of us had one name each, right? I just had to go quickly through the WhatsApp conversation that we had. Receipts. And some of the names were good. So the names, one is African Paramedics Podcast, African Parapodcast, African Paramedics on the Frontier, Pulses of African Paramedics, and then there was also Parapodcast. And the slogans was uniting paramedics across the continent, beyond emergency medical care. And this is more to emergency medical care. There's more to emergency medical care, and paramedicine from Africa to the world. And the names that won was Parapodcast as the official name of the Parapodcast. And then we had Paramedicine from Africa to the world as part of the slogan. But
Nathan, now if anything says Africa, just know it's Malusi.
But I think to answer your question, Nathan, is that we didn't foresee how the Parapodcast was which direction it was gonna take, but as we continued, it became adaptable to the trajectory where the Parapodcast was moving towards to, and this was in line with the initial goals that we had as encompassing a broader healthcare, but also inspiring and teaching and information dissemination. Like, for example, one of the episodes that is doing well is by Elias Thomas, where we spoke about working in the cruise ships. And if you look into that, we trying to target spaces where information is not easily available. And that episode is one of the examples that provide first-hand experience into what happens, how to get to work into cruise ships, but also we spoke about a lot of things like LinkedIn profiles, CVs, all of that, which is quite relevant and important. And the thing is, one thing that I've realized about YouTube, the podcast that itself, is that it might not be doing well right now, but in future, that information will still be relevant and people might go to and look at it into. And that's what we're trying to do, is that what we started with and where we are now, there's been a huge growth into the platform, and also to be part of other people's podcasts, because of we see value in sharing that information with other people and collaborating with other people.
Yeah. And I think everyone's got a story. And I think that's what we found with this podcast. And I found fascinating speaking to people and realizing that, you know, what you see on the surface is actually, there's a lot more that goes into that, into them. And I mean, you said an interesting thing, Elias, about walking into the barber shop, you know. So we started this podcast a couple of months ago, and kind of look at the analytics and you see how many streams in each platform, and you think, you know, I'm only reaching a certain amount of people, and you think it's a small amount. And I was sitting with my mom, just came in and visited us here in the UAE, and she said, oh, I was just online with one of my colleagues, and he said that he listened to the podcast, and he said, oh, are you sitting with Nathan? And yes, you're sitting with my son. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, it is reaching people. It is getting out there, and it starts slow and it builds over time. But what you've created at the beginning and all those conversations just are still there, and you can still, people will still get the advice from it, and that what you've built is always going to be there, and you just build on and go from there.
Yeah, and I think that's very true. And just to say that to your podcast as well, I was listening to the peptide thing as well, and I was like, I've never imagined, I've not thought much about peptides like that, and I have not even thought of where do they originate? Are they a big thing? You know, but then you listen to the podcast and you're like, this is actually Ozempic is a peptide. I didn't know that. But you know, so those are the things that you can, and then you get those snippets, or like you get to learn them, and you go read up on it. Now you're well informed, and as you're making decisions, someone might just, what are the effects of it? Okay, let me actually go listen to the guest that was on Nathan's podcast that was speaking about this stuff. What did they actually, because they are specialists in that area of practice, and it becomes like an information session, not just for people within that line of work, but also just regular people on the street. And like for us as well, we hear from our students a lot, and they will be like, oh, even like my colleagues that we play football with, they will be like, oh, I see that you have a podcast. And I was like, how did you get to know of this? But it's the algorithm, you know, it kind of like, especially the shorts. I gotta say the shorts really reach a lot of people. You might not see the effect, but you know, as they are scrolling for 5-10 seconds, they get to know about your podcast. They try and look at your channel, and that's how it sort of just disseminates, and everyone gets to know about you. And it's fulfilling to see that it's actually reaching people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you listened to our episode about that. I was also, yeah, it's, as you said before, it's interesting because when you learn about a topic now, you have to be prepared for the episode. So you have to really know what you're talking about. Otherwise, you're going to look quite silly, or the episode is not going to turn out nicely. And I think that also the format that we have for our podcast, I don't always agree with my guests. I think that's just what we've chosen as some of the things that we've decided that it's going to be. So I see some other podcasts where it's not a bad thing, but there's no kind of pushback. So on our podcast, you do get some pushback. But from your guys' perspective, where do you see Parapodcast going? What are the goals, and what can I say, like in 5 years' time, it's going to be like?
You know what's funny is that if I were to be told to stop podcasting now, I'd be fine with it. We have about 40 podcasts that are out there that we've done. We've documented stories that I've always wished to document. I've spoken to people that developed degree programs for South Africa, like I think the top people that have done that, we've spoken to them, and that documentation is something that is going to be required or needed or used by people in 10 years time. It's right there, it's done. I think it's just priceless, the fact that we've done that. I think the fact that we have these documents, there's these files that we have of podcasts, is meaningful. Even if they have 10 views now, but if I want to do research in South Africa about community paramedicine, I know that Dr. Alan Bett, who's in Canada, has spoken to me about it, and I can tell someone to go and look at that podcast, and they'll learn about that. So where do we see ourselves? We keep on telling the stories. If there is a gap that we see, we'll try and find a guest that is going to answer those questions and talk about that gap. I think in terms of, because we are a developing country, emerging economy, so there is growth that has to happen, and would like to see ourselves as part of that growth. The fact that we have a window, we are like the window of what's happening in the developed world, and we want to have them see those things through us, and those things assisting our industry to become better. And also, there's a lot of great stuff that happens in South Africa in terms of critical care and education. Like South Africa registered, professionalized in the 1988 or 1989. America is still struggling with that, So there's a lot of learning that can happen intercontinentally. As much as we are a developing nation, the dark continent as they put it, but there's a lot of learning that can happen. So we want to be part of that. And these are the conversations that we have. So it's just continuous doing what we do, so that there could be learning that can happen across continents and globally.
No, I really like that.
I was just going to add to what Malusi is saying as well. Two things. I think one, academics. And obviously now that we have had the opportunity to partner up with like a training college in terms of just CBD points, I would like to see us sort of like influence academics. Like we had the gentleman from UCT came on and he spoke about the modules that they have. So
Willem
Stassen.
Exactly.
Prof, sorry to that.
Exactly. So, and it after that conversation or that podcast, I actually had people reach out to me to ask about, hey, I've been a CCA for this long, but I didn't actually know that there are ways for me to get into higher qualifications. And that's the point. Having those conversations actually invites sort of like a window for people to learn how they can progress into academics. But we also like to be influential into academics in terms of research. I've not written any papers before, but having the conversation and hanging around these gentlemen, we're doing 2 papers now. One looking at a Namibian EMS, because there's one paper that was written was probably like 20 years ago, but there's nothing that's been updated, and we're having these conversations with people that are on the ground. So we want to get into writing papers, literature, especially about EMS in specific specific countries. Let's start off with Namibia and South Africa. Let's go into Botswana. Let's go into not just conversations now. We also turning into like written papers as well. And I think the other one is just collaborating so that universities can know where universities are and really partner up so that we can connect that, especially in the South. I think it's not difficult for South Africa to connect with Lesotho, Eswatini, and make sure that, if there's a university there, if they know that they need academic stuff, where can they go? And I think just also as a window for work opportunities as well, we have had a lot of people that come on, sort of like message us to say, hey, I'm trying to work in Saudi Arabia, for instance. Is there anyone that you could connect me to that's working there? And I think just obviously connecting with these professionals on the podcast, it creates that window. So hopefully we can influence those spaces and really let the profession grow. And just, you don't have to think that you can only be a paramedic. You can be a community paramedic. You can be a manager. You can be a leader. And there is a space for people. You can learn how do people get there. And if you come to the Parapodcast, we have covered those conversations. So I'm hoping that we can cover really a lot of those spaces into the future and like effectively and leave blueprints that people can actually just go back to look at and hopefully follow into those footsteps and become that.
I think you guys have done a fantastic job, and I have a theory that you guys are probably going to write a book in 5 years' time. I think that's what's going to come. Once all the PhDs and everything are done, a book's going to come. But getting on to the topic of your podcast is obviously around EMS, African focused. So we're going to shift the conversation just to the EMS. I always like the idea of looking at other industries and seeing what they do right and what they do wrong. So starting on the negative side, what do you think is wrong with the EMS now? What can we do better?
So that's quite a tricky one. I think more of what are the challenges that we're currently seeing in the pre-hospital medicine. That's how I view it, and you have to maybe break them down into different various topics where you look at workforce, education and training, systems, culture, or research, for instance. Something that has always been consistent, and this is something that I'm passionate about, is burnout that I keep on seeing in emergency medical services. There's also staff shortages. There's brain drain, more particularly, not just South Africa, but in other countries as well. Look at all four of us sitting here. Where are we? Retention, mental health. Yesterday was with Malusi when he had a layover here in Qatar. There's something that he said about recently one of the younger ECPs was involved in a car accident while on duty responding to a case, and unfortunately he died. There's so many stories that are currently happening with that. And yeah, from my side, I think as I've brought them into different various aspects, but the few things that are spent out, staff shortages, mental health, retention, brain drain. When you look also into education, we, especially more in South Africa, is that you've got a lot of your certificate medics or emergency care professionals. They don't have a career progression. It's hard for them to progress, whereas they remain where they are in terms of salary, job position, and also with that, it's affecting them in a way that they become unproductive at work. There's so many things, but that's a bit from my side.
I think this idea of burnout is so true, because if you look at how many people, especially what we studied, the 4-year degree, that go do their 2 years and then end up going overseas. I'm talking about specifically from Southern Africa. It's too much, to be working, 5 shifts a week and running calls on the weekend and being on call and doing overtime shifts to make extra money. And I think, I'm saying specifically South African EMS really needs to look at this and plot a way forward that someone can work their career clinically and get to the end of their career, maybe retire as a clinician. Because in the UK they do it, in the States they do it, some other parts of the world that they do it, someone can be a paramedic from the start. But if you look at in South Africa, it's just not possible. It's too hectic. So I think that's something that we really can do better at. It's not possible. But I think I also like to look at the EMS and like what can we export from the EMS. So what do you think is really good quality of the EMS that we could maybe, or other industries could learn from?
Lucy, I'll let Malusi go.
So, so I don't know what Malusi thinks is that I really like this question mainly because of there's a lot that we can learn or can teach each other, you know, and it's more about teamwork under pressure, how communication, adaptability for us as an EMS. There's a lot of adaptability that we have to work under, you know. You go to a scene, it's chaotic, decision making with limited information, leadership regardless of the rank. What else? Debriefing after difficult situations. So I think those are things that we can think about. Remaining calm during chaos, you know. And this is everything that is currently we facing as EMS professionals in the work that we do in the pre-hospital setting.
I think one of the things that stands out for me is just how assertive paramedics can be and really learn to be just comfortable in the sometimes toxic environments as well, and like really difficult environments. Like you don't sweat it, like you just get what needs to be done and you move on. And I think that's possibly that sort of like endurance, sort of like mindset is something that we could possibly teach to others. But I think in terms of learning, I think we can learn a lot from aviation. I think in terms of precision, in terms of discipline, and I think in terms of career progression, I think the nearest or sort of like that we can benchmark with is nursing. I think nursing has been doing great, like in terms of career progression, getting into their masters, getting into their PhDs, into leadership. Like I still feel that paramedics still have that imposter syndrome that you can't be a hospital manager. Yes, you can be. And I think us sort of like us seeing beyond that would be something that we could possibly that will allow us to grow, basically.
Yeah, I'd say when you posed the question to me, Elias, I was still stuck on the negative, and then Elias and Nathan asked that question too. I'm still thinking about the negative. Let me try and tackle both. I'd say there is the great thing, the camaraderie that we have just amongst each other. There is that brotherhood that exists, whether we communicate or we don't. As long as the person wears a uniform, you greet them in that way. There's that association, which is pretty cool. And it also talk to the chaos in the scene. If they're not fighting about who's taking the patient to where, but there's also that assisting the patient into ensuring that everything is done well in that sense. So there's that camaraderie that happens, which just from different units and people work together. On the negative too, I'd say it's still on the professionalization for me. What Tulani touched on, there's a fatality that happened, a person that died while they were working. Completely sad, young person, and it's a newly qualified. The question is how many more are going to leave us like that? And then the question is it preventable? Is there anything that can change in the industry? What can we improve to do that? So there is that mindset that we have. As much as we're talking about it, I can know and be confident that there's nothing that's going to happen that's going to investigate into that. So it's likely going to happen again. In any industry, if a person works in a factory and they die, there's definitely going to be an investigation there, and there are going to be structures that are going to be changed in order for that to be prevented. Even in the mines, it's the same thing. They're going to try and have, if there's one facility, even here in Australia, and I know that in South Africa it's the same thing too, in Africa and other countries, there's going to be an investigation. But it doesn't happen with us. We mourn, we are comrades, which is good that we are united. And the organization is still going to want money. They're still going to want more patients. They're going to hire the young qualified. They're going to tell them that I want this patient. You get on scene, get the patient first, and then you get the patient to be in your level of qualification so that we make money. It's still going to be there. It's still going to happen again and again and again and again. We need to do something about that. I think it's something that is in my heart, especially after this fatality that happened. I know the area where he worked. I've worked there myself. I sort of understand the culture. I think I saw the cars, the sirens and stuff, people mourning that fatality. But I do think that we need to go beyond that. We need to change, professionalize our industry, and take one fatality serious and say, how do we say it's never happening again as clinicians?
Sorry there. Just to add is that obviously may his soul rest in peace. One thing that we as sitting here is that we've got the wisdom, right? And to say something that when I was in university, something that Dagmar Malba said to us when we were students, well, Dr. Malba said that new clinicians or PCPs when they graduate, or paramedics when they graduate, they get given the response car, but they don't understand what powers do they have in them. I mean, once you get that car, your goal is to think, okay, when an emergency comes through, I need to get to the scene as quick as possible so that I can help the patient. You don't take into consideration how fast you're driving, how safe or not. Also, there's no internship that teaches you how to drive, how to respond to emergencies. We get given the responsibility to say, you think you know, take the key and be responsible. But what does the responsibility mean? How do you go into to go to those cases? And subsequent to that, I now understand what Dr. Malba said back then. And this thing that Malusi is saying, it's not only necessarily about going to cases quickly, but also, from my experience, is that I was burnt out the first year of working. I used to work road ops. On my off days, I would change to helicopter and to work in HEMS. And there was a time when I just finished, I was on standby at night, I did cases, and in the morning I handed over the keys to someone else. I took my car and drove to the HEMS base, which was about 53 kilometers or more than that. During my way there, I fell asleep on the road, I was tired, I fell asleep, the car drove onto the side. I think it's the first time, or the second time I'm telling this story. The car drove onto the side, and all I saw was dust. There's a car, there was a truck behind me. Luckily, I didn't die. But that would have been another classic example to say he died while driving. But when it comes to investigation, there was nothing that was going to happen to say why did that happen. And this is what Malusi is saying also, is that there needs to be investigation, but also part of us sitting here in this conversation is that we need to drive this information to say this needs to change, especially for young junior paramedics, especially within our setting in ASA. It's quite unique worldwide. Yeah.
I think obviously, and I say this for the four of us here, but I think we at some point are going to be taking up management positions, and I think not allowing that culture to continue and really being cognitively aware of these things, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, no career should take your life. You know, that's that it can be tough. You can have burnout, but I think if it puts your life at danger, then that's not right. I remember I was in first year, and we were responding with the provincial service. And we were going from a hospital, and we were taking a patient from one hospital to another hospital. So it wasn't even really, we weren't responding to an emergency, and it was like 2 a.m. or something like that. And I just looked through the little window of the ambulance, and I looked down and I saw the guy was doing 200 kilometers an hour. And, you know, if we just touch a stone or we go into the barrier, me, the patient, my partner in the back, completely unrestrained, it would have been over, you know, not even a question. So I think there is a certain amount of risk that is inherent in the EMS. We drive around, we go through robots and those kind of things, traffic lights for our international audience. But we really need to consider the risks that we're taking on and mitigate those as much as possible, so we don't get to the point where a young person loses their life doing what they're passionate about. We have other people falling asleep at the wheel. You know, that's not right. We can't carry on like that. But what we do on this podcast is we have a closing tradition where we ask the guest a question that they haven't seen before. And today we're going to do something that's slightly different. We're going to ask you 3 questions. Easy. So there's 9 questions in total.
Can we call a friend?
There's one. Yeah.
Your friends are here. Your friends are here. Yes.
You're on the spot now. You're on the spot. So there is a question on clinical, there's a question on education, and then there's a combined questions, or the theme of the questions is career, ethics, and the future of the EMS. So I'm going to pick who does what. But what I want you to do is it's just rapid fire question, just a bit of fun. Agree, disagree, and just maybe in one sentence or a couple of sentences tell me why. Okay, so let's start out with Malusi. We're going to give you the clinical section.
Glad it's not me.
He was talking too much about academia, so we want to see if we can put him under some pressure clinically. So these are just, agree, disagree. So paramedics perform too many unnecessary interventions. Agree, disagree.
You know, the issue is this.
No, Malusi, agree or disagree, Chief?
No, I live in different countries and I see things from different countries. I'd say I disagree. I disagree. I think that there is still room for stuff that could be done by clinicians in the pre-hospital setting. It's just that I can also agree at the same time. But it's okay, I'll disagree for this one. You see, there's a problem with the academic mind.
No.
But my
right
point
on
is...
Right on the fence.
Yeah, but it's okay. There's still interventions that can be done by clinicians in the pre-hospital setting. If we had opportunities to help people and actually, like, if the patients don't need to go to hospital, we can leave them at home. If there are some interventions that we do that can be added to the scope of practice. So basically, I'm not talking about critical skills, because if it's a critical skill, the patient needs to go to hospital. But if there are some interventions that can be added where you can leave the patient at home that doesn't need to be taken to hospital. So yeah, I don't think we do a lot of interventions.
Unnecessary. Okay. Thank you very much. The next one, I think we start, Malusi, by saying agree or disagree. and then we go from there. Because you missed the boat there on the first one.
We're not in courts, Chief.
Yeah, we're on court. This is my episode, so I choose how it goes. On your podcast, you can do it how you want. Wow! I roll with the iron fist here.
Market treasure.
Okay, next clinical question. The EMS relies too heavily on protocols instead of critical thinking. Agree, disagree?
Is that still on Malusi, or can anyone take it?
Malusi, yeah. Malusi.
Do the question again, sir.
The EMS relies too heavily on protocols instead of critical thinking.
I agree. I'd say this. I think now, considering the fact that I've worked in different countries, we try to move towards what we call guidelines. But at the same time, if all fails, my mind is gonna say, what does what's written there say? I'm gonna do just that. Or even when I'm too tired to critically think, I'm gonna just say, this is what it says there in the book. I'm just gonna do that. So, and also I've seen that there is no a really promotion of, especially where I am now, there's no promotion of moving away from what is the standard. You need to curl up in the boxes where exactly how it should be. That's how it is. And even when we have, like in South Africa, where there is a critical care paramedicine that is practiced over there by ECPs, I'd say even if there is those guidelines that are seen as guidelines, there is no quality improvement ways to ensure that is done properly. So sometimes you do want to have quality improvement, ensure that not the guideline is done in a sense. So I think protocols they drive us. That's what we do, and we try to move away from them, but at the same time we still do them, sort of thing.
I think I'm not sure if you're allowed to add to that.
Add,
yeah,
please.
I'm just thinking that it also depends where you are within your career span. If you're still new, I think you must rely heavily on protocols and guidelines to just make sure that you get a hang of it. But if you are experienced, if you have 20 years on your back, then you have seen this thing 5-10 times. You can do it with your eyes closed. So I think it also depends where you are. So there's a lot of critical thinking that comes with a lot of years of experience as compared to a newbie.
Yeah, and I think what we really need to do is teach critical thinking at university, and I think that needs to be a big part of. Well, I mean, it was part of our studies, but I think it needs to be a bit more widespread. Okay, Malusi, last question, and this is actually from a conversation that we had on your episode. But
no pressure.
Studying the EMS in South Africa is unaffordable.
Oh, absolutely. Unless you have NFSAS, of course. But so agree. Sorry, did I do it right? Agree. Agree, say. So I agree it is unaffordable. For example, we have people that are currently working as basic life supporters, ECAs, that can't just stop working now and go and study. They can save for a long time. They can't afford it. So it's something that is well known, that is out there. It then becomes something for the privileged few. And actually, I'd also go further and say, even when if you want to study further beyond your qualification, even if you had a degree, there's nothing that pulls you towards studying further because you want to actually build a house for your mom, buy your first car from your family. So it's something that is very expensive. The socio-economic status of our country really affects people going to study, and EMS education is expensive.
I think just to add to that as well, again, I'm becoming the commentator here. I think in comparison to what the value of the degree gives you in the South as compared to the rest of the world, I think it's way much cheaper than any other place in the world.
So, Nate, I'm sorry to add that So just quickly on the previous question is that you mentioned that we were taught critical care thinking, but there is a complete dissonance between the actual work when people are really working for a service, because the service pushes to say you have to stick by the CPGs or the guidelines, whereas even if people wanted to have critical thinking, they still try to abide by what the company they're working for is pushing. But with that said, is that we far more better than where we were before, because when I was a student, or is that if you get a trauma patient, you put a 16 gauge or 14 gauge. That's how it is. You administer large amount of fluids. Whereas now, people do still apply the thinking behind, even though they're still sticking to the clinical practice guidelines to say, okay, does this patient need this? But yeah, and as for education, although it was not targeted at me, I agree with both my brothers here. That it is quite expensive. Obviously, I cannot compare to what internationally it is. Obviously, Elias has that experience and the knowledge with his exposure.
Yeah, I think just on your two comments, the critical thinking needs to come from the industry, not just from education. Completely agree with that. And then I agree with you in terms of affordability, because affordability is not just at the time you're paying, it's actually afterwards, because many of students unfortunately have debts, they have family responsibilities, some people have their only graduate is from, they're the only graduate of their family. They're making income and they have to pay for other things in their family. So affordability goes beyond just how much you have to pay to the university. Okay, next section. I think we'll do Elias on this one, because you had a few comments for the last one. Elias. This one is related to education. And because you obviously are working full-time in education now, you'll be able to answer the best.
Hopefully.
So just agree, disagree, simulation is a poor substitute for real patients.
Disagree. I think simulation is actually where you get to see people apply the knowledge. Sometimes people cannot articulate the knowledge that they have, but in simulation you should be able to show at least that you understand the concepts.
I think that was a cheat question, because I think you should give him a more harder question. And the reason why I'm saying that, not that I'm exposing him, but it's something that he likes, he's passionate about. But anyway.
one of the diplomas is doing is actually has to do with that. So that's like cheating 100%.
Okay, fair enough.
I think the difficulty is the only way to test it, the thinking of the student, or the critical thinking of the student, is through simulation. But I don't think we go far enough when we are doing simulation in the classroom to simulate a real environment. So there's so many things that we can do that are not high fidelity simulator. We can improve, the sounds, the environment, so many other aspects of doing simulation. So I would disagree with you. I would say that it is probably a poor substitute for a real scenario, because us as educators, we don't go far enough, and we could do simple things that could improve that.
Yeah, I think I was just going to add to that as well. I think there's a common belief that as an educator that you understand simulation, but I think simulation, there is a lot of depth to it. Like in terms of just setting up for a simulation, first you must set up a simulation to meet a specific outcome, and before you do that as well, there must be pre-briefing. Like in terms of this is what we are going to try and achieve, so the student needs to be briefed. And then even when you go into the simulation, you need to understand how much the complexity of the fidelity. If we're trying to just achieve the student going into a scenario, treating a simple asthma case, right? We're setting it such that the sound, the things that they see, sort of like all the social cues are speaking towards that. And I think the whole sort of like set up process to that, and also the post the kind of feedback that we give the student as well. Do we just say that, okay, your patient saturation was low, your patient had a wheeze, you gave your nebulizer after 5 minutes, why was that? Or do we go like, I noticed that you realized there was a wheeze, but then you only gave the nebulizer after 5 minutes. What was your thinking behind that? To try and really get to understand how the student was thinking. And then does the student walk away with something after the simulation? Do you give them a resource that they can look at? Do you actually give them something that captures their real-time application of the simulation to say that at 2 minutes, this is what I did? Or actually, I was there for 2 minutes and I was just puffing around. I did not do much, and I think that feedback allows a student to grow. So I think there is a lot of complexities that we don't always take into consideration when doing simulations.
And it's very easy for us as educators to get into the habit of just doing the same thing over and over again and not pushing ourselves to make it better.
Yeah, and I also think as academics, I think we are taught to see mistakes than to always acknowledge the positives as well. So it's always just important to not lean on what was wrong, but also what was good, and really support the students and create, as they say, a student that's scared doesn't learn. So how can we make the environment really pleasant for the student to learn?
Absolutely. Okay, next question. A master's degree doesn't necessarily make you a better clinician.
No, it's fine.
Let's see. All of us have master's degrees.
I would say, okay, I mean, obviously I'm still busy with mine, but I had the opportunity to study at different universities. So hopefully it comes through this time around. So I had different exposures, and I would say that it does make you a better professional, not necessarily a clinician. It also depends in what your master's is in. If you're going to do research specific to that topic, I think that you tend to grow in that area of practice, or at least, I don't know, if you did something in that specific area, you tend to grow in that space. But I feel like there is a certain aspect of independence that comes with your learning and how much you want to learn, and a certain level of responsibility that comes with it. Different modules as well. Like I think I've said this to Malusi and Tulani before. I had the opportunity to do a master's at Queen's, and it was absolutely expensive, £11,000. So I had to drop it. I couldn't afford it, but it was so good. It was so good such that it was taught by different cadre from different parts of the world. There was someone from Australia, there was someone from the US, and there was someone from the UK, and you really got to see how each and everyone applies themselves to their practice and what are the lessons that they have learned from their environment. Being a paramedic or a critical care ICU paramedic in Australia, for instance, what do they do? What is their scope of practice like? How do they ensure that all their patients, like you have a first pass tube if you're intubating, for instance, how do they do that in the ICU in the US? What are the protocols around it? And I feel like you learn a lot. So I feel like someone that's studying there with someone that's not, I think it speaks for itself.
No, absolutely. I mean,
can I add on that, Nathan? Sorry. I say if you are doing masters with clinical practice, like where there are components of clinical practice, and you are a good clinician already, so that can make you a better functioning clinician around your space and your operations. But if you're doing a research-based masters, that's different altogether. You can professional. But if you are deciding to research about something that has nothing to do with operations, it can not make you better in terms of your operations. But it can assist you to learn more about a lot of things, like your research, understanding how to read papers, how to critique papers, and all that. So as a researcher who is a clinician can make you be able to ascertain and get knowledge as a clinician, basically. There's a difference between the two. Yeah.
The masters that I did was clinical. 2/3 of it was clinical and exams.
Yeah. So, are you a better clinician now?
So much better, yeah. No doubts. There's no doubt I'm a better clinician for it. So shout out to those at in UCT. Definitely made me something better than when I started. Okay, moving on to one, maybe a little bit of a touchy question for the Gen Zers, but students today expect competency without enough experience. Just agree or disagree?
I think I agree. I agree. And I think that is being made even much worse by large language models. Because the amount of time that you spend critiquing, like even for instance a paper, or like critiquing a skill, or trying to understand something, it used to take you much longer. But the duration that it takes you get into this sort of like loopholes where you get to learn different things, as compared to now where it's just all like information is sort of like snippets, and people tend to prefer snippets over the long sort of like term. So I feel like it's different, right? Like I wish I had ChatGPT when I was at school. I spent like nights just trying to understand a paper and write a review, and then the next morning you're naked, you're literally tired, so exhausted, and you still have to do a class, and there's still another assignment. So I felt like it could assist you then, but I also appreciate the kind of experience it gave me, because I don't need to read most of those things anymore, because I read them, and I understand them, and I can remember a scenario or how a paper was done in Uganda or in Tanzania where they tested babies on like giving fluids, and they wanted to test sepsis, right? I'll remember that. I don't need to go back. But for someone that just read snippets of findings from a paper, you do not have the same experience.
No, I agree. I think maybe with large language models, we are outsourcing some of our critical thinking and our knowledge to somewhere else. And
But you
I
can't
always
outsource
said,
the
like, I was
understanding,
actually, I did my master's before, actually all my training before ChatGPT was released, like 2022. And I'm very glad that I didn't have that as a resource, that I actually went through and read all the papers, made my own conclusions. I think it's an important thing.
Yes, I think the saying goes, you can outsource the thinking, but you can't outsource the understanding. And I think that's very true.
Yeah, that's so true. Okay, last but not least, Tulandi, you're in the hot seat this time. We're going to be
difficult,
speaking
please.
about career ethics and the future of the EMS. So the first question is, paramedicine should not be a lifelong career. Agree, disagree?
Can you repeat the question?
It's Chief, you understood the question.
Paramedicine should not be a lifelong career. We should be transitioning from paramedicine, the clinical aspect, into something else over time.
This is quite tricky, but I disagree. Because the thing is, I disagree because, if it's something that if there's a clear career path where you see where you're going, or if you enjoy it, even if you don't have a clear career path, it can be a long-term rewarding career. I mean, we've had people that, if you look at anecdotal evidence or experience of what we've observed from people, is that they've been in the EMS. There are people that have been in the EMS for years, and they still not burn out. I'll make it an example about the Paul brothers. I'll make an example about the Paul brothers.
I saw that one coming.
I'll make an example about Malusi here. He's sitting. Craig Wiley. So it can be a long-term career. Obviously, it has its own challenges that might affect you, but it can be a long-term career.
Can I add into that, Nathan?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
But there's one thing that I've learned here in Australia is that you have people that actually retire from here and they look forward to retirement. So it means that they are 62, 63, 65 years. And that's how they just plan their life. I would say majority are good clinicians. I'll say 80% of them. But mostly when they're towards the end of their retirement, they'll be tired. But they'll be like, I'm tired of doing this thing. You see how they function at work. But my point is that it can be a lifelong career, depending on how you structure your life and what you prefer to do. And once you get to a zone where you just know like how to do it, you go to work, you do the work, and you just finish. It can be done. there are pros and cons of that kind of a lifestyle, but it's something that can be done. But also, there will be minds who say, I can do this for so long and then my mind is bored, I want something else. And it's not only the physical component, like the being unable to lift people up, but it's also the just the mental challenge that you want as just a person. So it varies from person to person. I think my answers, again, they touched on both sides, as academics do.
But Lucy's riding that fence now the whole time.
I think what I was going to say is just that it depends where you are, like in terms of, are you in like a village setup, or are you like in a city? Like I see that in a city it's much different. People don't want to work, especially once they 10 to 50 and 50, they don't really want to do. There's a lot of drama that happens. But when you're in the sort of like a countryside, you can do it, because usually the station is even like a community set up. You know everyone. It's a bit of you're supportive of each other. So I found that, at least in my experience, that people tend to work much longer at that station. And for some, it's just their life, right? There's nothing for them to do at home. Even though they retire, they come to work, and what they will do is that if they were ACPs, for instance, they will step down to an EMT. So there is less of a responsibility in terms of their application, and they just do it. It's just part of their life. Like there's nothing. If they sit at home, obviously then the knees and everything starts complaining, as compared to when they come to work. They are mobile. They take care of the station, and they mentor the juniors that are coming through the ranks as well. So they just see it as like something for them to do, and it's part of their life. So I guess it depends where you are. If you're in a village side or town, sort of like a countryside, it becomes part of your life. In the city, you don't really want that. It's too much drama, people hating on each other, too many young people. So nah.
No, I agree with you. I think it's environment, and I think one of the real struggles with the EMS is actually night shifts. So I mean, if you have to work nights, it's very difficult to do that for your whole career, because to get into healthy habits and that kind of stuff can be difficult. Okay, next question. So this is related to ethics. So clinicians should be able to post anonymized clinical stories online. Agree, disagree?
Agree. Right.
Okay.
It's more the stories, if they are posted, more for educational purposes. But when you say online for educational purposes, then it's okay, mainly for educational purposes. But for content creation, then definitely it's a no. Because the thing is, we always learn. There's ways of learning. You learn in the classroom, and through engaging with each other, and through information sharing. So I see it as information sharing, to say, this is what happened, this is how I tackled this case, and how can I improve it. I mean, there was a episode that we recorded, but it never went out, where there was a video on, there was a complete chaos. I don't remember the specifics. There was complete chaos around that scene, the patient, the way they were intubated. From that aspect, we wanted to use it from a educational perspective, discuss what was done right, what was done wrong, how can we improve. So all of that. However, somebody can see it is that this is a patient, this is someone that you see there, and they didn't give consent for their videos or their. So, but for educational purposes, I think we should be doing it, not for content creation, because we need to learn. That's how we learn from each other, through what we see. And what I think the biggest thing for me is that, how can I not do the same mistake that the other person has done? How can I improve as a clinician?
Yeah, the motivation is so important there. Are you putting it online to say, look, I'm a hero and I want to get so many followers and so many likes, or is it part of an educational process? Because I think those are two completely different. Okay, last question. And this is on the future of the EMS. So I want you to look into your crystal ball and see if you can see into the future, and tell me, Will the ambulance of 2040 look the same as it does today? So the ambulance of 2040 will look the same as it does today. True or false? Or agree, disagree?
It won't look the same, so I disagree. It won't look the same.
Tell me, what is it going to be different?
Remember, Nathan, that EMS is evolving completely, and we can't just say, the thing is, the question is so broad that it doesn't give specifics. Understand? So for me, there's a whole lot of changes that will happen. I'll make an example from when I started as a student. That was like 2007. There was navigation, for instance, used to be on map books. I didn't even know how to use the map book from that aspect. And I worked, subsequent to that, I graduated as students, as a practitioner. We were on paper-based for the company that I worked for at first. Even the ambulance that we worked in, if you look at the stretchers, they were low, the sirens were different. They had on the side, back then, the ambulances, how the sirens looked like, the structure of the ambulances. There was not a lot of put into the designing of the ambulance and what is inside. Whereas now, ambulances look differently. In future, I don't know how it might look like, but definitely they can't be looking the same the way they were. There's going to be things that will make the jobs of emergency care professionals better.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, I want to add as well.
In 2000 and
It's a hot topic, yeah.
2013, I was working for a private ambulance in South Africa. We had EPCRs. It's 2026 in Australia. We still don't have ECPRs. I can just stop there.
Be specific to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Just stop there.
I think what I was gonna say is just now that you actually, Tulani, you mentioned the maps. I remember because Windhoek is so small. When you used to respond, you could have a quick glance at the map, and then you take the main street, and then the second street, and then normally know it's gonna be the fourth or fifth street from the main turn off, right? So you kind of just knew you didn't need to, you just knew the house number, that's it, and you're gonna get there. But now obviously it's different now. Everyone's using GPS, and it's getting much more complicated. But one thing I was gonna say is that I kind of feel like, in terms of now how ambulances will look then and how it will look in the future, I feel like EMS is very slow to uptake technology, and I feel like in the age of AI, I'm hoping that we can have more. I'm hoping that the kind of equipment that we use, I think my dream idea is always to, and I'm not talking, I can't remember who the person is. I think there's a documentary out that they were trying to raise money to say that there's gonna be one machine. You take a blood sample and it will give you all the
yes.
Theranos.
Yeah, and I think I think there's a documentary.
What's the name? Alicia Holmes. Yeah, this is a documentary.
Yeah, but I think in the future, and this is just for medicine in general, we should be able to connect one monitor that will give us all the data. And I'm hoping that it will be like that for the ambulance. And in terms of how we do different things, I still look at an ECG and I see all those wires that are entangling and all that. I'm hoping 10 years or 20 years from now, we are not going to have that. And it's going to be much more advanced than that. And hopefully our vehicles are going to be much more friendly. I still see people that are carrying stretchers. Malusi, they in Australia only press a button, get in and get out, and I think most more countries, so that people can last longer, and they can work longer, and they can be much happier at work, and hopefully they can earn more money. But yeah, that's it.
I think that I like the part of earn more money. I think these questions are good, that they trigger conversation. They trigger conversation. And it makes you think, it makes you also reflect on where you are currently in the world and where you come from. Lucy, from where he was, we both worked for the private ambulance service in South Africa. They had EPCRs also there, whereas where he's moved. So certain ambulance services, they prioritize what they think would be better for the EMS professionals. I'm not sure, and this is my experience, if they consult with the people that are currently working there to say, what do you think of this? Can we incorporate this? All the decisions that get made higher up there, and then we get to use what is available there. But obviously, with that said, is that there's also some resource constraints, financial constraints, where you're currently working, and all of that. So what companies prioritize is that how do we deliver effective care with what we have. But I certainly agree with Elias is that probably in the future, people that have money will have better interpretation monitoring equipment whereby you don't have to put the whole 12 lead ECG cables. They might just have one strap that does the 12 lead ECG. The communication between us and the hospital will be better. And I think there's a lot more if you look at the economics of the ambulances, the stretchers. I mean, in resource-constrained countries, it's still, in South Africa, we've moved from, I'm not sure how old you are when you're a student, Nathan, is that when I started, paramedics used to carry those stretchers that you cannot adjust the height. They either lift the patient up and then load into the ambulance, whereas as time went by, they were able to adjust the stretcher with different heights. So we hope that in future there'll be better ambulances, even maybe seeing electric ambulances, who knows?
Just to end that, now this is speaking in terms of the future of EMS, and I was attending the MTEX conference here in Dubai, and Nadine had a presentation, and she spoke about paramedics in space. And I thought, to be fair, I was like, oh, that's reaching a little bit. And right, and there's a series that I'm watching, and it's called Expanse. Right now, obviously they're on a whatever you call it, on a spaceship, and then there was an instant deceleration. It's carrying thousands of people, and obviously after that, people get thrown around and so forth, and now the thing is that you don't think much of it, but then in terms of gravity, you start to think about if you have internal bleeding and you are in, I don't know, whatever gravity that they have there, you're not on zero gravity. The wounds are not gonna be, obviously, if blood is gonna start pooling, and wounds are not gonna drain properly. So basically, any bleeding that's inside is gonna tend to clot. And then I was like, well, maybe there is a space for us to be paramedics in space. And it's not reaching at all. Perhaps it could be the future. And these are the kind of things that we'll learn, like, how do you manage bleeding in space, or patients that have bleeding in space. So maybe we can have paramedics in space. So maybe the future is paramedics in space. Just to close off that, it's not reaching at all. I think it's possible.
I think that is definitely, if we have more people in space, we are going to have people doing EMS in space. So that's definitely something that's going to be on the future. I didn't know that this question was going to end with space paramedics, but I'm glad it did. To add my 2 cents to it, I think that the biggest changes to paramedics and to ambulances is actually in the critical thinking. That's going to be the decision making within the ambulances. I think AI is going to start taking over more and more critical decisions away from clinicians, and we're heading into an interesting time with AI making more decisions for us.
Look, I know we're in closing here, but I'll be worried if clinicians heavily rely on AI in terms of clinical decision making, but also you have to track the source. If you started with AI, you never went through what we went through. We went through sitting in class, reading, learning, having assessments, learning long and hard sounds, doing diagnostics, all of that. AI can be used as a support tool, not as a clinical decision making. You as an individual have to look, the patient is presenting to you, sweating, diaphoretic, or whatever the clinical symptoms that they're presenting with. You have to be able to make the decision, okay? This is how my patient presenting, and how do I manage? What is the patient presenting with? Maybe AI You can put that information, I must actually test it. It will give you various answers. The patient could be having this patient, and you as an individual rely on that, then you're definitely going to kill the patients that you're treating. I hope we don't get to that part. But
I think if we look, I agree with you,
that.
because I think that if we look at the major shifts in EMS, what is really going to change in the next 15 years, I think that some of the decisions are going to be made by AI. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be overtaken by AI, or we're going to have AI kind of robots picking up patients from the side of the road. But I think we're going to see small adjustments to equipment. I think we're going to see changes. Maybe Malusi's going to get EPRFs. I don't know.
Hopefully.
In the next 15 years, we'll have to see. Maybe, who knows? But I think the major changes is going to be in our clinical thinking and how we're going to be using AI. That's my 2 cents.
I mean, just maybe to add to that, what Tolani is saying, and I think it's very important for you to have insight as to what's going on. You need to understand, because if you don't understand, then you're just gonna go with the flow, with whatever is thrown at you. If the AI says the ECG is a STEMI, and you do not see a STEMI, but you need to know what a STEMI looks like in order for you to interject it. But I think most of what the AI is really advancing is that it's getting vision. It's getting sort of like audio, like in terms of hearing, and it has much more training data than you as an individual can ever have. If I feel like if things like ECG interpretation, things like radiography, things like it's sort of analyzing blood samples and that whole clinical picture, I'm not sure how long we're still going to have jobs, but I think most of those things are genuinely going to be taken over. And the precision as well, the sensitivity and specificity of the AI, if it's fine-tuned, I think you can really do great things.
Yeah. No, I mean, as a healthcare provider, I'm pretty confident that we're never going to be fully replaced, because I think that health and healthcare is so much more than just fixing what's wrong in people. People want to interact with someone. People want to speak to someone. That's part of healing. But thank you, guys. Thank you very much for joining. It's been a really fascinating conversation. Just before we end off, where can everyone find your podcast? Can you tell us the hashtags and the platforms and everything?
Yeah, so basically we are on Spotify. That's where I think we're trying to prioritize mostly Spotify and YouTube a lot, just because everyone uses YouTube. We do try and push out shorts there. We have long form content on there as well, and then we have TikTok. TikTok is usually our snippets of sort of like the shorts of conversations, highlights of certain parts of the conversation. And usually if you find it there, please go over to YouTube and watch the full conversation. And if you have any other questions, just go to our website, www.parapodcast.studio.com, and please leave us an email or whatever, or even on Instagram as well, Parapodcast 3, or on YouTube, Parapodcast 3 again, and TikTok as well, Parapodcast 3. Just leave us a comment. Let us know if there's anything that you'd like us to change, or if you want to be a guest on the podcast, please give us a shout. We'll be happy to have you. Of course, there are some vetting that you have to do just to make sure that you provide value and and stuff like that. But we are available on all those platforms.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate it. It's been a great episode.